Good evening, happy Friday, and welcome back to the stream. We live in a time where all our beloved franchises and entertainment have been bastardized and pulverized to the point of unrecognizability. And for a long time on this channel, we've been openly wishing that they leave the classics alone and create new stuff. Well, Hollywood has proven itself bereft of originality. However, I aim to bring you some of that new original entertainment we've been talking about for so long. Tonight's special guest behind the bar is author and sometimes outlaw ADEGA, friend of the channel, whose link is in the description, and he's going to tell us for himself what his stories are about and how you can get them. Let's just hope the film rights don't go to Disney, yeah? So top off your drinks, get comfortable, and strap in, 'cause here we go. Does that look exciting? Does that look exciting? Hey, Jaboomer, how you doing?
Good. No, I like the trailer. I made it full screen when I was sitting here. I'm like, I got to take this all in.
Right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, and I meant what I said. Friend of the channel. Let's get him in here right now and introduce him to everybody. You've probably interacted with him in the chat a bunch of times, but you know, unless you've actually seen us, and he's been making the rounds. You know, you saw all those bigger YouTubers, in that clip, chatting him up. He's been on a bunch of channels this week, but now you get to see him right here behind the bar. ADEGA, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. That's an old commercial. It's not on sale there anymore. No digital copies.
Yep. I already I have your book. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I am really excited about it. Real quick, we gotta take care of standard business. Agent Boomer, what are you sipping on?
Oh, I have here a Calypso Taste of the Island Southern Peach Lemonade. It's very tasty.
That sounds good. He's my designated driver. He's going to make sure that I get to the end of this stream, relatively easy. How about you, ADEGA? What you sipping on?
I'm half Indian and half Irish.
Mm-hmm.
I can't touch anything, otherwise I would be addicted. Love to fight and hate to do it, or I'm too lazy to do it. So I'm on
Woof.
Red
That'll get you going. I'm with you on that. But as for me, anyone want to ask?
What you sipping on?
You poured yourself a
mega pint of red wine.
Correct?
A mega pint.
Yeah.
I poured myself a large glass of wine.
And if you'll notice, it's actually the same kind of glass that you see Johnny drinking from in the cabinet molesting video.
Oh my goodness!
I saw that. And I'm like, I want a mega pint. I definitely got to have a mega pint. It's a redneck wine glass. And what's really interesting, these actually have in the stem, there's two little 22 bullets.
You want my empty one to show?
No, that's okay. I don't think it'll show up real well on camera anyway, but yeah. So that's what I'm sipping on.
I used to have a soup can with a handle attached, like a wooden handle attached to it that I got at some blacksmith type thing, but it looked like someone made it, out of trash. And
Yep.
brought it to work, and my coworker said, "Oh, I got to bring this to the bar and say fill her up." It's basically a Campbell soup pan with like a handle attached. It was funny.
That is so funny. So anyway, I meant everything that I said in the opening there. I have been so disenchanted with all of our favorite franchises, and I've been saying this, the bigger channels have been saying this, just leave these things alone. Make something new. Keep in mind, all of our favorite franchises were new at one time. Star Trek never would have gotten its start if Lucille Ball hadn't said, "Hey, that looks interesting. Let's give it a shot." George Lucas, would never have made Star Wars if he had been able to get the rights to do Flash Gordon. He wanted to do Flash Gordon. He couldn't do it. So he says, I'm going to make something of my own. And these things blow up and they become these ingenious multi-million-dollar franchises. And they started from nothing. Somebody had an idea and it was added onto sometimes by other people. It's a collaboration. I think we tend to give too much credit to people like Lucas and Roddenberry as if they did it all by themselves. But speaking of all by himself, ADEGA, you're putting out content all by yourself.
I'm trying.
Let's start with, what is your elevator pitch like? Just out there.
Elevator pitch?
Yeah.
This is something that you have not seen before. I don't even, maybe terminology may be familiar to you, but I have brought so far 3 different universes where things are completely unique. One, evolution is a whole series of humanity set 1,000 years in the future, and a lot of nuances with breakaway civilizations, ancient civilizations, multiple characters. And in every single thing that I write, the people in it are character representations of people that I've known. Because I was a doctor for years. I've known a lot of people. And each intriguing person that I've known, I put into this. Names have been changed, but their personalities are there. These are what real people in real circumstances would act like.
Yeah. That's something that we talk about here a lot, is that our favorite stories are character driven. You don't care about, the Force or the phaser or the alien culture or whatever, right, if you don't care about the characters that you're through whose eyes you're seeing this world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the biggest problem we've seen. We don't care what the color of their skin is. We care about the content of their character. As we've been seeing this as we've been called istophobes by, all the content creators trying to, blame us for not liking the crap they're putting out. Well, it's your job as the creator to make us love this character. And, don't call me an istophobe. I've loved characters that look nothing like me, whether they were a cartoon dog or a black man or a Asian woman or whatever. I was totally able to root for that character because I cared about that character. And I didn't need to insert myself in. I didn't have to imagine I was an English female archaeologist, in order to enjoy the film. It's just, that was the character I played in a video game, and it was a lot of fun, and now I want to see it on a big screen.
Yeah.
Your stories are they evoke an epic scale too. I mean, like, once you care about the characters, you start to care about the world that they're in, and you want to know the lore, and and that speaks to fans. Is that something you thought about, or is it just that's your style and you just went with it?
There were some things that I was keen on when I started writing this, and I think that's why it comes out, because it resonates with people. Is one, the characters have to be real, and you just mentioned all of that. That's what sells things.
Yeah.
Other people grabbed onto this, and I think it has more to do with my imagination. I hear people all talking about the tech, because it really isn't anything that is in any other books that I know of. Maybe one thing a little lightly here and there, but. And this is one of the things that we mentioned just before we got on. I stopped watching anything Star Trek, anything Star Wars. It's boring because the people who are writing this went to college and were told what to think. So when they write, they're telling you what to think. Where us here in this group, and even the new Zoomers are catching on that. It's not being told what to think. It's being told how to open your mind.
Yeah.
So you can think for yourself. And that's another thing that I did. It was just I put a canvas, paint a little bit of a picture, and let you do the rest. Instead of saying, well, the doorknob was here like this. You can hear the creak on the floor, and it was wood in this type of wood. I don't get into that kind of detail. I hear a lot of people say that Stephen King, because he did all that kind of detail. Sometimes they like it. Sometimes it really turns them off of a chapter or two because it's just too much.
Yeah.
Use your mind.
I've always felt, and see, I used to be a big Stephen King fan, and I was the same way. There were some times where I loved it because it pulled me into it, helped me imagine it, and so forth. There were other times when I'm like, can we just, I'd skip over and I can skip over a page and a half, because it didn't matter. And I think there's, Stephen King can get self-indulgent. He gets caught up on details he thinks are cool. And it's like, no, does this really matter in the story? Who was it? A writer. I'm thinking maybe it was Script Doctor over on Midnight's Edge was talking about this, and he was talking about knowing when to dig into the details because it's good and meaty, and when to, what, this isn't important, nobody cares, let's just say the thing so that we can make the thing happen, or whatever the case is. I think that's a great primer for us to get started on. It's also given the chat a little while to kind of weed in here. So real quick, let me say hi to everyone who's here. Big Al was first. I didn't see anyone earlier than Big Al, so he said, "Have a great stream, my friend. I super appreciate it, and see you tomorrow on the rewatch." Matanui, hi, good to see you. Of course, the bouncer, Netter of Netter's Network, whose link, of course, is in the description below. She's checking IDs at the door, and I love you too, sweetheart. This aged boomer guy, who I just have around so he doesn't get in trouble anywhere, but he also gets me home safe. Deleted Scenes, Stephen Otten, good to see you, my friend. Yeah. Got up this morning to a private message from Steven. It's like, oh no, and it ended up being, it seems like every week on Geeky Geezers over on Age of Boomers channel, also linked in the description
Oh,
below.
thank you.
Yeah, always. It's like every week we start out with our, good old days and whatnot, and then we lead into someone famous just died, and it's getting to be every week.
It's happening. It's becoming rather sad lately. It's like every week someone new that we.
Yeah, and this week what Stephen pointed out to me, because he and I tend to share some very common, although slightly more esoteric interests. Julie Cruz, who did all the crooning in a lot of David Lynch productions, including Twin Peaks, passed away this week, and that was kind of crushing. I knew she was struggling with lupus for a while, but that's still a real bummer. So thank you for letting me know about that, Stephen. I'm kidding a little bit, because obviously I need to be aware. I don't want to go 6 months and go, really, she passed away. But lovely Sherry, always making the bar so much more beautiful with her presence. Thank you for being here. Claude's, I forgot. I know we went through this pronunciation of your last name. Sailing.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. There we go.
That's how I hear it in my head, anyway.
It's gonna be a couple weeks. I got to keep saying it, Ned are correcting me, and then I'll be okay. And that brings us up to date with everybody who's actually hit the chat. So by all means, and ADEGA, you were saying earlier that you and I know you're there, you comment and you say hi and stuff, but you said you lurk a lot, and
Yes.
that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But by all means, at least say hi when you get here, because I want to at least know that,
And then I can say hi, sweetie.
Then she can say hi, sweetie, of course.
And then I have to type a response.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. No, I don't think Ned will feel slight, because this is something I pointed out. It's like she's literally here at the keyboard, greeting everyone and doing all the things. Some people I hear are like listening in the car, or they're, at work or whatever. So it's like, I understand. I get it.
Well, if I'm on my computer, it's real easy. Things boom. But if I'm on my iPad, which is usually where I do the lurking, it doesn't. The autocorrect is weird on that, because it memorized a lot of my early writing stuff. And if I write a word that is even similar to a name from one of the early books, it starts changing things, and it looks like I'm drunk when I'm writing this. No.
Well, if it looks like I'm drunk, it's probably because I am, but or I'll use it as an excuse anyway.
Is that the age-old question? Do you write drunk and edit sober, or edit sober and write drunk? I don't know.
Well,
wait a minute, edit or vice versa. Sorry,
I think
I that up. I'm just kidding.
I think you are.
Don't do either. I'm just.
I think sometimes it's helpful to write drunk, but then absolutely edit sober, because then it's like you can look and go, "Hey, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go with that." Or, "What was I drinking last night?" Scrap the whole thing, But always remember, get someone else to edit too, right?
It's funny.
Don't be your only editor.
I remember being in a screenwriting class when I was younger, and the teacher said, "Do not write your screenplay for this class while you are high. I do not want to read another screenplay where a flying squirrel comes in and starts talking to the characters or something." It's like so.
Yes, and Stephen Otten's talking about the Spielcheek.
Yes.
Right.
Is not our HOUR friend. I think I said this last week. I don't remember whose stream I was on. I was, and this I hate, because on all the other social medias you can edit what you send out. Twitter you can't. So you better reread it before you hit send. And I'm notorious for not reading. And I was typing something about, I was translating for the medium, I wanted to say something about verbal diarrhea, and I said keyboard diarrhea. But what I actually typed, and I'm not sure if it was my fingers that did it or it was probably like a spell check, auto check kind of thing. It came up keyboard diorama. And then everybody is liking my comment. And then I look, it comes up and I look at my comment from the people liking it and I go, keyboard diorama? Oh, well, whatever. Hopefully they knew what I was talking about. It would have been funnier if I meant to say diorama and I said diarrhea. That would have been funny, I made this diarrhea. This Star Wars diarrhea.
You got a title for a book there, keyboard diarrhea. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. So, ADEGA, how did you... I mean, I think everybody has a creative spark in them. And we tend to think in terms of narratives and stories. But what was it for you that took it from the passing fantasy to, I'm putting this down on paper or into the computer or whatever?
That's a good question because I really don't know myself. No, it's the first couple paragraphs of Evolution I wrote maybe 20, 25 years ago and lost it. Did it again about 10 years ago and lost it. It wasn't really that big of an interest because the story kind of a little bit was in my head, just one or two of the characters. And I had to retire because of health reasons. And so I sat down and said, I'm bored out of my skull. Let's do something. And then just boom. And I used YouTube as an editing tool because I could hear what I was writing. I'd read it out and then hear it. And it went on from there. It's one of those things, you get right brain, left brain. And I've been one of the ones fortunate enough to where I can hone in to either side, except recently my left brain's kind of shutting off and I'm becoming stupid. So
left brain logic, right brain hippie
creativity.
Type? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And coming from the healthcare aspect, I used to be a doctor once upon a time. You see a lot of these really, really talented artists and they end up dead early. I've got a hypothesis running that if you go too far to the right brain, you lose the skill to be able to survive.
Look at our society right now. It seems to be very much that way, right? I mean, that, and it's that is the hardest thing because you have so many people that are reacting to things with zero logic and completely on gut feel, and this is the way it should be, and we should wave a magic wand and take away everyone's guns or whatever and this and that. And it's like, in a perfect world, in a perfect fantasy world, yes, you're right, but we live in the real world. Let's go back to Sesame Street. What happens next, right? I always mention that. I remember in Sesame Street, they used to have these crazy scenarios that are so obvious. So I'm going to put you up on this on the seat that's on top of this pillar. What happens if I pull the pillar out from under me?
Right.
Well, if you pull the pillar out from under me, I'm going to fall, people need to kind of think that through. I'm my channel, I can get a little political if I want.
Yeah.
So, feel free to disagree with me, but I'm going here since I already brought it up today. This whole idea, there's this big shooting, it's the gun's fault. Well, the gun did not, walk down to the school and start shooting the place up, right? You need to look at that person, well, they got the gun legally, so da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, but there's a whole lot of other factors that went between this person's ability to buy a gun and deciding to shoot a bunch of people, right? I mean, when you look at the statistics of how many people own guns, if everybody that owned guns was out shooting people, it would be a very, very different world. And that's not generally the case. most gun deaths are. Well, first, do you know this? What is the number one grouping of gun deaths? Do you know?
Stupid people.
Well, you could make that argument.
Gang warfare.
No, it's suicide.
Oh,
Suicide is the number one, death, gun-related violence.
Just ask the Clintons. They know a lot of people that had that problem.
Yeah, a lot of people got Clinton. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Sorry.
We don't know what happened. This guy, he's sitting in a public park with a gunshot wound and a gun in his hand that he didn't own. There's no blood anywhere around him. His shoes aren't dirty. He didn't walk through the park, but he just Clintoned himself here. Yeah. See, that's another reason I wanted to bring. I do like. I didn't think it would be a problem talking politics with you, but that's exactly it. You start looking at things like the state of mental health. All the politics that went into it. You start seeing these kids shooting up schools, and as the news starts coming out, you start to find out that there were warning signs, huge warning signs that people had to specifically ignore for it to get to this point. You find out that there's a history of violence, things that were not acted on. These school shootings, not to get too Alex Jones here, but, you find out that there was money given to a certain school and they were supposed to do certain things to set up safety and they never did. And there were no locks on the doors, which, was part of the plan. And so now this ends up, and then there's a cover up. The school does not want to get in trouble for not having the simple safety measures in place. There's all these other things, but you're going towards, let's make sure that law abiding people that have never committed a violent crime can't, exercise their Second Amendment rights. I mean, but anyway, so.
Oh, it's okay because that logic carries over to a lot of things. We get too many fat people, so we need to outlaw forks and spoons.
Exactly.
The problem.
But that brings us back to the mental illness, right? There is I feel there's a whole generation, maybe two generations, that they talk about fairness and equity and so on and so forth, but they don't want to talk about personal responsibility. See, and I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but I know we're probably chewing some of the same, temporal ground here. Okay, but we grew up with parents that, and for generations before us, that's not fair. Well, get used to it. Life isn't fair. Life isn't fair. Life isn't fair. I used to hear it all the time from my parents. Life isn't fair. Get used to it. And I started to understand that because, first you deal with other people who have their own personal interests. They're not looking out for you. They're looking out for number one. They're looking out for themselves. You deal with nature. Nature doesn't care. The tsunami isn't, out to ruin your day. It's just nature. It's not fair, but it happens. Get used to it. Deal with your own stuff. Take responsibility for yourself. And now we live in a world where, no, I want everybody else to change their life to make it fair for me.
Pay for my gender study college tuition.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, and this is the other thing I'm starting to understand. If you just focus in on the social media aspect, you think that everybody who goes to college, is believing that they deserve to have their college paid for. And that's the majority of people in the world. And you realize, well, first, not everyone goes to college. In fact, most people don't. Most people go into the working world. Those people are not most people are not real big on paying for other people's college. Number two, there is still enough logical people that go, yeah, you trying to become a doctor, you trying to become a lawyer, you trying to become, some sort of a specialty, that's a worthwhile investment. So the bank wants to give you a loan so that you can go to school. You will pay that back because you will be making the kind of money that will pay it back. You want to major in underwater friggin' basket weaving. Well, you're never going to make that money back to pay it. Why should I pay for that? Where is the investment for me? Where would society?
It's a rare skill, underwater basket weaving.
Actually, it's funny because we always that's a common goofy underwater basket weaving. Come to find out that I found out from somebody who does like wicker and stuff that you actually do have to submerge the wooden stuff in order to weave it and make it soft. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I just learned something, and I didn't have to pay for a college degree to get that information.
Can I ask some questions?
Yes.
A question of ADEGA?
Please do. Get us back on track. Be my designated driver here.
Now, I take it you write science fiction, and I have a question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. It's my main thing is science fiction, but I do have, and I had 2 publishing companies fighting for me a few years back to get my fantasy.
Okay.
It's
All right.
Dark high fantasy, and it's very unique. And they wanted it in the worst kind of way. But COVID hit, some things went.
That could happen.
So I've had publishers.
This kind of applies to both. I have a question about world building. Actually, I'm trying to come up with a question for world building. How do you start with the world building? Is it a difficult process? Do you like what do beginning writers? I guess I would ask. What do they get wrong about world building, and maybe what did you learn along the way when you were trying to, I guess, create these more fantastic worlds? I guess
I'm gonna sound horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I've never had a problem with it. Never had to struggle with it. Never had to work at it. It just pops into my head and I put it out. I have a group of characters that I want to get from point A to point B. How do they get there? What are the obstacles? How do they falter? How do they grow? What's the overall goal in the society or individual? Are there morality lessons? And then everything else falls into place. Because it's people who pay attention to my stuff realize that if you're religious, you're going to see some really heavy religious overtones. If you're not religious, you're going to see some really high-ended long-term survival morality that's put in there. These are things that should be universal truths, things that modern stuff is walked away from. In order to get those in there, there has to be, like you said, the world building, the vehicle. And like I said, I've had several authors that have been pissed at me because I say it just comes out. I sit down, I put on some Mozart, and then here it comes. Or I go to sleep, I wake up a little groggy, there it is. Got to write it down at the moment. Oh, sorry, I can't help you there. But no, you'll see the commercial. You'll see the commercial when he shows it later on. It's my newest one where Joe Malazzi talks about my world building.
You know what? Let me just go ahead and play it right now. Hold on.
Okay.
So his credentials speak for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure I had that prepared to play because that's impressive to me.
I guess the only reason I brought it up because I noticed some of the treatment of our favorite series like Star Trek, Star Wars. I've been noticing lately there's been a trouble with world building, and I just was wondering if that's becoming a lost process.
Let me expand on that because I've thought about this too when I think about these rather complicated world, and I see that as a problem of picking up somebody else's writing. Right? We talked about George Lucas and so on and so forth. And I've always identified it as J.J. Abrams came in and he didn't want to bother watching all the Star Trek and getting all the history to get the story right. So he just says, we're just going to start all over again. You know, I don't, and you even hear that from Kathleen Kennedy. We don't want to be bogged down by all of this canon. You know, we're going to make up our own new canon. And that's absolutely not what fans want. They are invested in that canon already. They're not going to scrap it all and start all over again. So yeah, so let's talk kind of about that canon, because that ties directly to world building. As you come up with an idea, let's say you come up with ideas organically, you interject that into the story. How difficult is it, or is it not difficult for you to keep track of those details in your mind, or how do you do that?
First off, to the other thing, just briefly, in order to write about a world, say you're going to be Star Wars, Star Trek, you have to know the world.
Yes.
And they don't.
Nope.
And they don't care.
Yep.
So it comes out, obviously. And so they start preaching their agenda through a story that they don't understand. And the rest of us see it as garbage. And that's all it is.
If I can interject, I've heard them say this. I am not putting words in their mouth. They have specifically said, this is fiction, so we can do whatever we want. Kathleen Kennedy has specifically said that. And writers, real writers and fans are going, no, you cannot. Yes, you can invent something, but once you've done it, you lock yourself in. It may be fiction, but it is real to the world you created. You cannot go back and break those rules. And then you start having people making videos about how the Holdo maneuver breaks how hyperspace works in, Star Wars and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I was bringing that up with Joe, kind of related. One thing I've never wanted to do, because I don't feel I can do it, and he says I can, but writing time, we've seen on several different sci-fi things where they either go forward or back. There's a relationship. If comic books do it a lot. And I brought it up and I said, well, this is something that I would be afraid to do because the nuances, the different things. And he says, you just find the set of rules, you stick to those set of rules and you'll be okay. But still, I don't want to touch it. But with those type of universes, if you don't know the rules, you don't have a story, period.
Right.
With mine, you asked about this. Like I said, I see the beginning, I see the end. I know the trip that the story is going to go through. And then it's locked in for me. Yeah. The only thing I have issues with is names of locations, because I try and make things up, or names of individuals. There was one, I finished a book a couple of years ago. It should be out in about 6 months. It's the third book in the series, where I had a husband and wife. The husband is one of the main characters. She shows up, and then I bring her back later on, much, much later on, and I forgot the name. I didn't write it down anywhere. I have to go through thousands of pages, hundreds and hundreds of pages to find out where I had done this. And it took a little time. And then, there's her name when it was written once, and I had to write it back. So names of places and people, that's something I find difficult. But with the fantasy, with the sci-fi, I do have my new one. I don't give out too much spoilers on it. You can hear the whole thing on my page, and some people say this is my best work. It's
link down below, everybody.
It's called The Reach, and it's totally different than anything I've done before. Some people think of it as an origin story for something, but you'd have to go through it to understand it. But keeping major plot, the way the worlds work, locations themselves isn't difficult. It's the names. And I've always had problems with names. When I was a doctor, I'd see people all the time, over and over, for different conditions. And if I look at them, I knew their spine, I knew their condition, I knew what I needed to do. Didn't remember the name. So I had the files and I'd pop open the name. Yeah, I have
Right,
cheat
right.
sheets. That's just one of those things I've never been good at. So that's the hard part for me.
Nanette and I have
PJ.
Orville Nation's in the chat.
Oh, hey PJ, how you doing? Good to see you, my friend. Netter and I have a friend. He was a buddy of mine in high school who went on to do two books in a series. I want to get after him, and I know there's a lot of fans that are hoping that he's going to put out another book in the series. We helped him to film a I wouldn't call it a pilot, but it's definitely a promo where we played some of the characters in his book. Came out really well. And
I'm in it like 4 times. See if you can find
yeah,
me.
she and Nanette plays 4 different characters.
Not enough.
One of
She
them
needed-
male. but yeah, in fact, I play a priest, and I in the filming of it, I really kind of threw myself into the character, and it's a scene where I have this explosive anger, and I shot the scene, and then nobody said cut, and I'm like, how was that? And everyone's looking at me like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, why? I was acting.
Literally, everyone took a step back except for me, and I'm sitting there just cracking.
Netter's like, no, that's not how he acts when he's angry. That's him acting. Oh, okay. But anyway, I digress. The reason I brought it up was because Netter was one of the people that did some of the editing work for her, for this author, and she's reading through it, and she says, well, here on page such and such, it says that you bent over to tie your shoe, but at the beginning of the chapter, you specifically said he put on loafers. It was a detail that didn't need to be there, but because he put it in there, you can't have both. And he's like, great catch. Thank you for, pointing that out to me. And I mean, I've written too. I know how that can happen. When you initially write it, you don't think it's an important detail, but the bending over to tie your shoe part maybe was an important piece of action to lead into something else. Okay, I better go back and change that thing about him putting on his loafers.
Now, with my recent one, The Reach, I had to do some homework, and I did have to write some things down. I have to take some of that back, because this one, I wanted to stretch my ability and the reader's mind as much as I could.
Yeah.
So part of the story is basically 2 stories combined into one, and part of the story is set in a completely weird universe, like someplace you've never been, where the people communicate by light, photophores, change colors, auras. They could see those type of things. And I had to keep track of what each color meant when they would show a different type of aura, express their mood, communicate by flashing different skin tones.
Sure.
And that one I had to pay meticulous, because I didn't want to put on loafers when I tied my shoes,
Right. Exactly. No, I get exactly what you're talking about. And you're establishing a lore, and these creatures, these aliens, these beings, if they flash red when they're angry, well, that tells your audience something. If later on their face goes red, that they're gonna know. Oh, we've already established that means they're angry, or whatever the case is.
Well, there was a little, and I'm just going to get personal here a little bit. The way I try and write, because you talk about red, seeing things.
Sure.
You're going to get 1/3 of the people that are going to understand what you're seeing.
Right.
Another third that learns by hearing are going to be lost.
True.
And there's another third that go by emotion that are going to be lost. So you're only getting 1/3 of the people you want to reach.
True.
So in that, I have to express emotion as well as imagery. And with this universe, there's no sound. So I handicap myself deliberately in there.
Yeah.
So it's try and tie it in to bring in as many people as you can.
That brings up
Cool.
another good point. You're also writing to an audience that if you're on your second or third book in a series, they may not have read the setup in the first book that introduced these creatures or whatever, may not know what red means. So you should be, as a narrator, so to speak, you want to be mindful of having your main character say, his face flashed red. I knew that meant he was angry, or whatever. And it could be a reminder to the people that aren't quite as detail oriented and read it but didn't remember, or whatever the case is. Yeah, no, I've always felt that, and it doesn't matter what kind of writing you're doing, whether it's a speech, it's a novel, it's nonfiction, whatever it is. You've got to. It is a form of communication. You are communicating something to an audience. And the only way to communicate effectively is to know who your audience is, kind of, know how they think. And I guess I kind of fall into that a little bit, here. I kind of feel like I know who my audience is. And I feel like, if you weren't, in agreement with me on, things about culture, things about politics, things that you probably wouldn't be here. So we're probably already on the same page. I don't really worry too much about, offending anybody, because I figure most people are pretty much here. But I do think through, how is my audience going to perceive this? What are they going to think of this, that, and the other? When I am
What was
writing.
interesting, just to break that down, what you just said,
Mhm.
there was over 5 times you mentioned emotions. And you didn't talk about visuals or anything else until the very end when you said think. So
Yeah.
if you write that way, you just handicapped yourself.
That's true. That's very, very true. And so that could be speaking very much to I'm not going to say a failing, but maybe a weakness or shortcoming in the way I'm thinking of communicating. And that just reinforces my point about how important it is to understand your audience and how they perceive what you're saying. It's also kind of why I don't even I directly tell people, please leave comments, give me feedback, let me know. I don't know what I'm going to do for next week's, stream. Make it your own show. Tell me what you'd like to hear me talk about, and we'll, make that happen. If there's a guest you want me to bring in, suggest it to me. I think that's probably one of the benefits too of like YouTube. You can have that immediate feedback. I don't have to go out and pay for market research, to find out what people are interested in. I can just ask the people and listen to them. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if you had a social media presence that you could pay attention to and get free feedback? Instead of just saying everybody that's commenting on social media is a bunch of istophobes, let me go pay a marketing department millions of dollars to tell me what people want.
Right.
Can I want to make a comment. Speaking of feedback, I was looking at a lot of the compliments you were getting from your readers in the first commercial, Troy. And one was actually from I guess a female listener who was commenting on how well written your women characters were in your books. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that difficult? I'll put it this way. We hear the term strong woman character thrown about in many media, and they end up kind of being blank slates that can't do anything wrong. I'm sure that's not what you do, but I'm just saying, yeah. So I guess,
well, for any person to be strong, they have to be put in a circumstance where they have to make choices. The strong person is the one that makes choices that advance causes of good, whether it be personal or for community or what have you. Understanding people, from having worked with thousands of people literally as a doctor, there are differences whether they want to believe it or not. There are limitations to both sexes whether people want to believe it or not. And with that understanding, it was not too difficult because I'm using actual characters, how they had to. Because I've had people, I mentioned this to other people, I've had people that gone so through horrific abuse to other people who have wonderful successes, people who've worked in dark corners of secret service, all kinds of different things that I've seen. And knowing what women have done in those circumstances, how they respond, knowing what guys have done in circumstances and how they've responded, seeing both the good and the bad, the people who've tried to delete themselves as opposed to people who have done heroic things. It became easy to understand the differences. I had to learn that because it goes on with the communication thing, knowing the 3 forms of communication. If I'm going to tell somebody this is how you're going to improve your health, they have to understand it. And I have to be able to communicate to them in a way that they're going to understand it. And they'll take it in and live with it. In order to do that, I have to know how a man will respond as opposed to how a woman will perceive it. And fortunately, having all those characters to draw from real life, I was able to do that.
I was kind of expecting, as Age of Boomer was asking that question, I thought we were going to get that line from As Good as It Gets. How do you write women so well? I think of a man and I take away reason and accountability.
I was going to have something similar, but I couldn't figure out a way to word it because I'm like, should you even be thinking in those terms? I mean, you're probably thinking more in terms of a character rather than, I don't know.
Well, yeah. If I can speculate, and ADEGA, tell me if you agree with me or not. I think that you have made a decision when you create a character, whether you want them to be male or female. And then you're going to decide what kind of male or female that, if they, are very close to your stereotypical gender roles, if they're, the girl's a little more of a tomboy or whatever the case is, you've made those decisions. So there's a way you want to portray that character. On the one hand, on the other hand, I think that we, and again, this speaks to a societal thing, I think we understand the difference between men and women far better than the modern society would have us believe. I think we understand that men and women think differently. We are biologically different. Biology drives things like hormones. And I'm not saying something sexist about, menstruation or anything like that. I'm saying that just like people that have a lot of testosterone have problems with anger, it's, this is just biological facts. Remember, believe the science, right? Well, we're talking real science here. And it shapes the way your brain works, and we dance around all this and try to, pretend it's not the way it is. But we know from thousands of years of culture, we know the difference between men and women. And, even if publicly on social media you're doing virtue signaling, in your heart of hearts, you also know. So as you read that book, you're kind of keyed in. Am I completely off base, ADEGA?
No, for the most part, that's pretty dang close. I don't want to get too much into the science of it. PJ will probably be fascinated by it, but the brain is in early development, is what it is. The first cells that start off in the body are brain cells, which becomes the spinal cord, which then goes into the different organs, then the bones, then the skin, and then everything else. But that makeup is who you are, XX or XY. And there are general tendencies of those, as well as it's a real thing. People don't want to admit it. Some people call it the spirit, some call it the influential energy that influences it as well. Where we run into difficulties is the brain is also very plastic, and people will say, well, I was born this way, or they would, you get people who are literally find pleasure in things that most people would think is very painful.
Mhm.
It's because the brain has been altered, rewired, changed to where pleasure centers respond differently than what a normal developed brain would be. And that is um, I want to use the word perversion, but that's a little too strong. Deviation.
It implies a behavioral thing rather than a biological thing too, I think.
Kind of. But the thing is a lot of these people respond this way because of aberrant external influences. And most of the time it's during developmental years, sometimes prepubescent, which causes a understanding of the world around them to be actually slightly diseased, warped, self-destructive in the long run, where we become accepting of things that are very harmful to children because they tell us we would be hateful or we would be unaccepting or intolerant. But intolerance starts where the abuse of others begins, even on a small level. So
Well, we used to, I think our parents used to have it. They didn't have the detailed understanding of neurobiology and things like that. They just knew what their parents taught them, and they passed it along. And like, again, another one of those things that has worked for thousands of years, and we have an instinctive understanding. How do you treat other people? Well, you treat them the way you'd want to be treated. Try to see things from their point of view, and teaching compassion, teaching that kind of thing. And when you don't, you're kind of being a jerk. And when your child acts that way to you, or you see them act that, there's a punishment because we don't treat people that way. We treat people the way we would want to be treated, and so on and so forth. And yeah, these are lessons you learn early. If you don't learn those lessons, you're a very different kind of person later in life.
I was very fortunate to move into a small town last year, very small town, middle of rural Wisconsin. I could leave my car anywhere in the city, unlocked and running, and it never gets touched.
Cool.
Yep.
People won't mess with it. You go to some of these other cities where they've had influences like this. Because I came from outside of Detroit, and you don't go into Detroit after 1 o'clock unless you want to be dodging bullets.
Yeah.
The overall influence is, in the long run, a survival thing. Which town is going to live longer? The one where the people cooperate and respect, or the one where they're shooting at each other? The United States, if you take away Detroit, St. Louis, Chicago, New York, some of these bigger cities, if you take the top 5 cities out of the equation, the United States would be one of the lowest in the world for homicides. But you put those 5 cities back in, with all that aberrant influence, we become towards the top. That's how you know that these type of things are incompatible with life in the long run. Right brain, left brain, too far on the right brain where everything's emotional. When you want to communicate with them, you better be communicating with them on an emotional level, because using logic and using history or using things like that just doesn't get in. It doesn't sink at all. It has to be done through an emotional process.
Well, and you really hit on it, that whole thing about history and logic. We keep quoting it, and people still don't want to listen. George Santayana, people that refuse to learn history are destined to repeat it, and it really is true. I've mentioned this on the stream before. I've got a buddy. We became friends through Star Trek and the Klingon thing and whatnot, but he used to be very, very left, very, very left. And I just challenged him on things. Why do you believe that? He'd say something about, Orange Man. And I'd say, why do you believe that? Didn't challenge him on it so much directly. Just, why do you believe that? What did you see that made you say that? And then I would show him contrary evidence. And he'd go, and then he'd start thinking, right? And then he would notice, as he started to listen to things that I said, that I would make predictions that came true very often. He's like, "Are you psychic or something?" I'm like, "No, why?" "Well, you said that this was going to happen." And I'm like, "Well, of course. Think through your history. This happened, da 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 da. Of course, this is what's going to happen." And he's sending me emails on a regular basis with a news article saying, "Well, you predicted this was going to." Yeah, I said if Joe Biden wins, watch for us to see a lot of the same things that we saw in the 70s under Carter. You know the connection between those two to start with, but their policies, and sure enough, we see it happening. We see the really high gas prices, the empty shelves, the runaway inflation, the global problems, with other countries. It's almost identical. I'm like, look, you play from the same playbook, you expect this to happen, right? Chess players that play chess, they know if I use this gambit, this is the likely outcome. And that other person knows too, so you make decisions based on the past. If you live in a world in your mind of, well, this is the way things ought to be, so this is the way we're going to, well, see how that works out for you. How has it worked out historically? I don't know, but yeah, that's exactly it. I got a buddy. You mentioned Michigan, buddy who grew up in Flint, Michigan, and he and his family, half of his family very, very right, the other half of his family very, very left, and yeah, it's the difference between thinking and emotion, because all the lefty guys over there are pro-union, 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 and he's over there with logic saying, yeah, how did that union work out for Flint? They literally drove the auto industry out of Michigan, and everyone's out of work, and the people that could afford left, and those that can't are stuck there in squalor, and they're drinking water that's got, that's brown, and lights on fire. It's not too hard. Oh, no. The unions protect us. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. They protect you so that you end up living in squalor with water that burns, that ignites.
That's true.
Um,
But they come from good intentions, though.
right.
Well, what are they?
You have to understand that, because
again,
most of them are thinking that this is what's going to make a better society, and they honestly believe that.
Before we had social media, the memes were, truisms, right? They were sayings. And one of them was the path to hell is paved with good intentions, right? That was a meme because people say it over and over again because there's truth to it. And it absolutely is true. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. Good intentions alone lead you into trouble, right? Having good intentions is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but then you got to engage the brain, right? How do I make my good intention happen? Go back to the Bible. Jesus saying, you teach a man you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. His good intention is to see people not go hungry, right? But he engages with the intelligence of, so how do we make that happen? You don't just give out fishes. You teach them to fish so that they can fish for a lifetime, And then, of course, you have Elam Garrick saying, well, give a man a poison fish and he'll eat for a lifetime too.
I saw that today.
Well, it's funny. Your talk makes me think of the bread and circuses for some reason when you said that, because that's what the Romans used to do to keep the
right. Well, what would happen is
to keep the populace
if you depend on your government for your food and your entertainment, they control you, right? Whereas if you take it into your own hands and you are self-sufficient, you owe nothing to nobody, right? And as far as government goes, well, you either change your government or you leave your government. Either way, the government dies, if you are self-sufficient. If you are dependent on that government, then you're a prisoner.
Well, I think that could also apply maybe to certain entertainment corporations we have in this world, that maybe you don't want to be so reliant on one or two, and you want to divvy up and maybe look for smaller creators too, like our guest tonight.
You know, I
Yeah,
said this in my Star Wars group. I pointed out that, you know, there's a lot of people that are fired up about, you know, the firing that recently happened. We'll talk about this more on Sunday, but the firing that recently happened over at Disney. And yeah, great, wonderful, step in the right direction. My comment on Doomcock's video was all that Chapek did was he removed one tumor. He needs to remove all of the tumors, and then he's got to start radical chemotherapy and radiation treatment. Otherwise, there's no hope. I said, but there may already be no hope. We may be well into stage 4 here, you know. But let's not be mistaken. There's too many pixie dusters out there that see, you know, this little movement towards, and they just go crazy on hope. Oh, everything's turning around. The woke is gone from Disney. The woke isn't gone till woke is gone. Cancer isn't gone. Well, actually, cancer, I don't think, and you could answer this better than I could, but my understanding is cancer's never gone. They talk about being in remission. You're doing good right now, but it's not gone. You don't assume that it's gone. So, no, the woke isn't gone. It's there.
Yeah, especially if you know who he replaced that person with.
I don't actually.
Oh.
Do you remember seeing a video of a lady who said we wanted to get at least to 50% of inclusive and alternative lifestyles for their stories? She is the one.
Oh, really?
Wow, that I did not know. Okay. Okay, well, I'll look into that.
And this is exactly what I'm talking about, because there's certain people that I follow, and one person that I'm following a whole lot less than I used to, who has been putting out stuff saying, okay, this is it. This is proof of what I've been saying. You know, things are turning around. And I'm like, at this point, I don't believe any of the tea leaf bullshit anymore. I believe it when it actually does happen. And if you want to come back to me and tell me after it happens, see, I told you so, that's fine. But right now, every time it doesn't happen, I'm the one telling you so, you know?
Well, and it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter either way, because I'll listen to both sides. But the thing is, I don't open my wallet until I see the proof.
Bingo. And that's what I was leading up to. This is what I said on my Star Wars group. I said, I shared Doomcock's video. I shared Valiant Renegade's video. And I said, look, you can take this as good news if you want. I'm just sharing it with you and pointing out that it means nothing until it actually does mean something. I said, but even if it does, even if this is a big revolution and now Chapek is going to start doing like Zaslav over at, what do you call it, Warner Brothers, and just start firing people. The only reason that happens is because of people like us that withheld our dollars, that gave him the cover to say, look, we're going to go bankrupt if we don't start fixing this problem, you know? And if you are subscribing to Disney Plus because you need your next fix of Baby Yoda or, you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi PSD, you know, PTSD, I mean, for crying out loud, you're part of the problem. You know, you are part of the problem if you are continuing to support this company who has put out on their customer facing page their intention to get political and shape the politics of Florida.
Well, hope is a good thing, but if you're hoping that dog butt is going to produce something other than crap, you got to turn the dog around. You get the smiley end, the smelly end, you know? And right now, the hope, and I'm with deleted scenes, he says he's done, and I mentioned this already. It's not that I'm done. It just, I'm going to ignore it until it comes around.
Yeah.
I don't care.
What you just said about hope, it's the same thing as good intentions, right? You know, it's a great start, but it leads to ruin if you don't back it up with a plan, a real plan. Hope is not a plan, you know?
It's funny. I do watch Red Letter Media on occasion, and one of the guys on there, they were reviewing the latest Picard season. The guy said he's a big Star Trek fan. He says he's kind of over Star Trek at this point. He can't go back and watch it now. And I know how he feels because I'm sort of that way with Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
But I can still go back and watch old Star Trek for some reason that I can still go back to. But I understand how you can get just sick of something because they made it bad for too long, and then you're just done. I don't know. But,
Yeah, I was getting to that point with both Doctor Who and Star Trek. I was looking at, the canon, their changing of canon, and saying, well, that kind of ruins, what I used to love, because it alters the point of view or whatever. And I started to realize, wait a minute. And ADEGA, maybe you can speak to this, but just because you're the creator of an IP, you own that. That's your intellectual property. You can set the canon, so to speak. But what does that mean if your audience doesn't accept it and buy into it? Because then you never sell your next book if they don't like it, and that canon dies. That's what I see happening with things like Star Trek. Okay, sure. Or actually, Doctor Who's a better, finer point of an example. They decided to change it so that William Hartnell's Doctor isn't the first Doctor. He's just one in a line of thousands of incarnations, and he just doesn't remember it before. Completely changing canon. Okay, fine. You can make the argument that because Chinballs owns is setting the canon now, and BBC owns that IP, that's what's canon now. You can make that argument, but my counter argument is, how's that working out for you? Because now you've had to sell it off to Sony or whatever, or license it out or whatever. You are unable to make something that's sustainable and profitable any longer, and it will die. Okay, you need the buy-in of the fans. The fans have told you, no, that's not canon. As far as I'm concerned, the Doctor died when the Capaldi Doctor, he just didn't have another regeneration in him. Actually, some people will go back and say, we'll do it right at Matt Smith. When Matt Smith ran out of regenerations, Clara wasn't able to convince the Time Lords to give him another set, and that's where it ended.
I have a story in my head that could fix the whole thing and keep what they did, as well as bring it back.
And this is where the fans are vibrating with hope, right? Oh, Russell T Davies is coming back. He can fix this, because the Master is an unreliable narrator. He always lies. It's not what the Doctor was told, and therefore, he can reestablish that. You don't even have to change anything that they did. Just change the framing of it, and just so you establish that stuff from the Timeless Child was a bunch of bullshit that the Master put out. And you can, in fact, there's a lot of really great good lore that you can draw on if you want to get into things like the what's it called, the help me out here, Trial of the Time Lord, the
Matrix,
the Valyard
and the Matrix.
You pull in the Valyard, and work with that. You could just say there's a Valyard Doctor out there, and there's that stuff going on too. And I don't know, but the point is, so absolutely right. Who owns canon? I think this is thrown around a little bit too much, but a lot of these great stories, these great franchises, have become like modern mythology. Well, what is mythology? What is the canon of the Greek pantheon, for example? And you will find people that will say, well, the Odyssey and the Iliad say this, and then there's these other writings, and so on and so forth, and there's this conflict, and one translation says this and someone else says that. That's right. But the general story is the general story, and it's really what people like best. And if you're going to then do a movie like Clash of the Titans, well, you're going to decide what you choose, and if it does well, that becomes canon, and if it doesn't do well, it just disappears into obscurity. Same thing with Star Wars. Back when it was 3 movies, the canon was pretty simple. Some fans decided certain books were canon, some decided they weren't. And I think Disney's learning that lesson as they're starting to go, you know what? The fans aren't letting certain elements of the EU die. So they're bringing it back in, and, some of it, it's just not working. Let's just forget about that. But that's actually a bad example.
An interesting thing, though, which is a really good comparison, because you mentioned the Pantheon.
Yeah.
The most authoritative, especially in all the different discussions, you may come down to a little bit translation, but the biggest thing is the earliest version of the story, which means everything else could be a derivative, a change, an alteration, but the earliest version is what we trust as the canon of the Pantheon, or of the Icelandic lore, or whatever it may be. So when it comes to Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, the earliest versions are the authority. It's just by nature.
That's exactly right. I think that leads into something else. If there is a change in the canon from later stuff that sticks, right? Why does it stick, right? And we've seen that.
Regeneration was introduced at the end of the Pertwee era.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
If you look at Doctor Who, they decided in order to continue, we need to be able to explain a new character. You could do the same thing with the Klingons in Star Trek. We're going to change this look because, that whole Fu Manchu thing just, that's not working. We got a budget now. We're going to change it. And over time, they came up with an explanation, partly because of fan input, and fan theories that they ended up canonizing. So I would say that things that change the canon for the better and are accepted by the fans, right? If you have that fan buy-in, you can change canon. You can augment canon. You can elevate canon, right? But if you change canon for change's sake and the audience doesn't buy into it, you're like, that's apocrypha. That's just apocrypha, using the terminology of mythology, right? Why are there certain books in established canon of the Bible, and then there's apocrypha that are interesting reads, lets you know what people were thinking at the time, but not considered to be canon? Well, it conflicts with the established canon, it doesn't fit, whatever, and it wasn't, only a small sect believed in it. Everyone else was unaware of it or never bought into it. That's another thing, being aware of something, right? So you find, I don't know, say a Book of Maccabees or something, right? You have one sect that was all about that, and then you have the rest of the religious world didn't even know about it, so it never became part of their canon, right? Same thing when you have a book in what you consider to be, Disney is releasing these High Republic books that nobody's freaking reading, right? So how can they ever be canon if nobody reads them? And then there's one book that they release overseas exclusively, so nobody else can read it. How
for the Chinese market? I remember that. Yes.
How can anyone ever read that? How can it ever be canon? If no one has access to it. That's what I'm talking about when I say, just because you own the IP doesn't mean you own the canon. But anyway.
True.
I mean, you won't have this problem for many, many years, I imagine, ADEGA, because you really are the George Lucas of your world. There isn't anyone else right now, but who knows? Maybe someday. I joked about movie rights. That could happen. And then there's that concern. Then there's maybe you bring in what do they call them, ghostwriter or something, help you out. I don't know.
Because of my health situation, I have my son who will he's going to take ownership of all the copyrights when things
Cool.
don't do well. I do have, I'll have to get with her again, someone who knows my voice. She was actually one of the publishers that recruited me because she loved the fantasy stuff. And I explained to her the very last book of the series. And so she has the outline, and she's the only one approved to do one book. Everything else is, you don't mess with it. And when I'm gone, my son has it, and you don't mess with it. And if nobody ever reads it ever again, you still don't mess with it. Because this is what I intended. This is for my family. These are people that I know. And you start changing the story, you start changing actual real people.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the examples of other authors. You know, I'm thinking of Frank Herbert, you know, and then his son takes over, and is it being shepherded the way he, you know, the way he would have wanted? You know, just because he had notes doesn't mean that's the way he was planning to go. He may have changed his mind along the way. Oh gosh, even worse, the Tolkien estate, you know, where they jealously protected that intellectual property, and now the family
Clowns couldn't wait.
Screw it, we just want the money, you know, and they start licensing it. They literally split.
Christopher guarded that.
Yep.
I thought pretty well, but
and then
he
when he
passed
was
on. Yeah.
when he was out of it, they just split the proverbial baby, right? You know, it's and now it's a complete mess.
But
so
here's what I want to say, though. At least when you're a single author, it's still literature. It's still your work. If somebody else does something with it, there's still the original work. There's still Tolkien's work. There's still, you know, E. Doc Smith's work. I think it's trickier when it's a work that was created by many different artists, like a Star Trek or a Doctor Who, or many writers. But at least when you're a single author, there is that definitive version. Like I was a big fan of Robert E. Howard growing up, but I couldn't read him for a while because I kept seeing all of these derivative Conan novels on the shelves. Like I want the original Robert E. Howard, and eventually those came into work, and I was able to read those. But yeah. So there's always going to be the author's original work when you're a single author. So you can't really ruin that. I'll say that they can't get to it unless everything becomes all digital and then they start rewriting stuff. But I don't. Knock on wood, I don't think that'll happen. People, I'll notice this even from working in a library. People, I think, still prefer physical books to the e-reader, digital books. But
that brings up a great point.
I don't know,
ADEGA. Do you want to speak a little bit to print versus digital? Because I know you work in both.
That's 100% correct. I've known quite a few people that said I'd buy it if I could have it in my hands.
Yeah,
and it's been digital versions, which I released on that website that you saw at the end of the first commercial, and told a little bit. I took them all down as soon as they started getting hard copies. Boom, throw it on again. People do want it in hand, and I've got about 7 completed. I think 5 of those are novels, 4 of them. The rest are novellas, large novellas. That hopefully I'll have them all out by this time next year.
Cool.
So I guess that's a great pivot into so the series. So I was talking, Evolution is available right now over on Amazon.
First book,
that's the first book in the series. The follow-ups are Revolution, Resolution, Echo of Nor, and Children of the Directive. Am I correct?
Yeah, you got it. Except people that have read Children of the Directive say that one should be the first one I should have released, but I didn't want to go that route.
In narrative terms, is it like a prequel to Evolution?
It's but they all are very solidly reliant upon the others.
Sure. And so like I said, Evolution is out now. What's the status of the other 4?
Revolution, hopefully it will hit the hardcover in a month and a half. My artist is finishing the cover. There's some bells and whistles I try and add to the hardcover, so when I remove it, it's going to be something special. Like the Evolution one, that people have when it comes out in paper. It's going to have its own unique thing, but it's not going to be that special. I want whoever has it to feel like they've really got something worthwhile. But Revolution, like I said, about a month and a half as soon as the cover art's done. You saw the eye. I'm just going to give you a little hint of what's coming. The next book, Revolution, will have an eye, but it will be a droid eye.
Oh,
which,
Cool.
yeah, it starts to really expand the universe. Once you read it, you'll know, oh, gee, I see that. And then the third book will have an eye, except this one will be white and glowing,
wow.
which says something as well.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
Children of the Directive is totally different. It's going to be black, and it's going to have that. If you're on my channel, you would see the watermark on each one. It's the three triangles. It's a representative of the Directive. The Directive is quite an evil group, and on part of that, their slogan is perfection, excellence, and domination. They're not good people, and that's the origin of everything for the humans in the current society, where the story starts off with. Echoes of Nor deals with things both 50 years after the previous books, as well as going and dealing with ancient history 4 million years ago.
Wow.
It ties everything together. There's one chapter towards the end of Echoes of Nor that puts the whole big picture together. It's chapter 40. If you were to see it, you go, that's the story. So you have to wait to get there, but it all. I've had nothing but glowing reports about everything, so I'm happy with it.
Yep.
Excellent.
And then over on the side, of course, you have the Blood Witch.
That's the one that the publishers were fighting over. Yeah, they really wanted that one.
I love that title.
It is. It's a good one.
It's dark fantasy. It starts off kind of in the middle of the story. Each book is a history book, basically. But they're stories. But it's a history of over 2,000 years. And this one starts 800 years into the story. It is a universe where magic exists, but only every 203 years. There's a pulsar that hits the planet, and if the child is born at that time that the highest light hits, they get magic. 3 forms of it. If in most everybody you'll know would probably be what would be called a nature caller. They deal with nature, basically. It's manipulating energy forces, more powerful stuff, lightning, moving water, causing fires. But it's limited because they have a mage sleep. You know, you do so much, you go. The other one, which is the most rare, and you would understand this, think of it's a healer mage, and it's not in the Blood Witch, just mentioned kind of, but they show up in other books. Think of like a Mother Teresa, someone who would, in the quiet where no one's around, would give their life for somebody else and never expect a reward, even if they don't even know the person. It's just in their nature to give all just to make someone else happy. And then the third one is a Deathwind, which is someone who bases and grows and develops their magic on absolute cruelty. They are the Blood Witch is it's kind of a curse or a blessing, depends on who you look at. It's a family that was altered by magic, and the family has a strong genetic code to have red hair. If someone doesn't have the red hair, they become a Blood Witch, meaning if they touch the blood of a living person, it will turn to gold. That's how the story starts out. But there's a huge family secret that was deliberately forgotten 800 years before. This is where the Olganza Witches starts off. That is just a tiny bit of the curse. And so the story of the Blood Witch is how she learns what the real deal is. That turning blood into gold is nothing compared to what everything else is. There's wars. There's many, many characters. Huge government intrigue. Like I said, it's a medieval thing. So there's several different nations involved, magic. But the big thing is each one of these characters that are in there has to have growth and hardship. And some of them I put through abject cruelty, like some of the people that I've known, to show what people can do, what causes a bad person to turn good, or a good person to become better, or an apathetic person to actually be motivated to do something. So the people who've read it said, yeah, it's about the characters. It's about personal growth. It's about that type of thing. But it's pretty in depth. I enjoyed doing it. And there's the first book of the history is it's the Organza. I removed it because it's getting the copyright and everything. That deals with when the curse starts on the family. The one that I'm doing now is, you've heard of the Silmarillion or book Bibles, those type of things. This is that without having to write that. It's the background of the universe in a story form. It's just no magic, none of that fun stuff. But it takes you to various different places there, and hopefully it's entertaining, but it explains a lot of where the universe is. The one after that is a few years after that story, where magic is reintroduced. It's the next 200 years. And the nation where this family comes from is put under some heavy stress. They have to overcome it. The very last one, this is the one that I have the potential ghostwriter with, since she likes doing urban fantasy. This one is set so far in the future that think of kind of a mix between 50s, almost, some people say steampunk, some of the ideas, but not quite, but kind of like a 50s feel. They still have airships, different things, but it is how the curse has changed over the centuries. And it deals more with politics, big governments, gun and running, some magic, some blood witch powers, those type of things. So that's a whole arc. But I'm on the third out of the fifth book, or third out of the 5 books. That's coming. So, yeah. And they, like I said, they really wanted this stuff.
And you'd mentioned earlier the reach. Does that factor into either of these?
No, it's
completely separate.
Yeah, that one came about, and all of you guys will understand this. If you don't, then I feel for you, because I think it's part of the human experience. I'm sure you've been in situations, and you guys can agree with me, for no reason at all. Maybe it's someone's voice. Maybe it's just looking at something or hearing music, where all of a sudden your body, it's almost like a drug, where it gets this euphoria that spreads the whole body. You have no idea why, but you just feel absolutely wonderful for a few seconds. And then it goes, and you can't repeat it. We have one of the main characters sitting, puts headphones on. This is not the one that I told you that flashes color. Starts drifting off, going off. People imagine different things, go to their own little quiet place to quiet their mind before they go to sleep. And while he's doing that, he hears a voice, a woman's voice, and it touches him. That woman can't speak, but she can share color. And across these different universes, they start connecting, and they understand each other, not because he understands her language or she understands his. It's because the energy and the emotion make such a strong connection. They start reaching, the whole point of the thing, reaching across these universes, and how their individual lives each other across these vast distances. And that's why I wanted to make her world as bizarre and as different from anything that people have read. At least in my mind, I don't know of anything. There may be something that's similar, but I don't know of anything. Where their universe is based off of a cooperation of energy. They have to be around somebody else to feed off of each other's energy to survive. There's not a food thing. It's a companionship of group and meditation and auras and how their world responds, where plants and different things will be responsive to their manipulation because of the energy that they produce. His is different. He's born into a political family, and turmoil starts to come into their world. And his politics, the family that he's born in, is think of a fascist community. So he's born into bad circumstances, and they both have challenges to overcome. And it culminates, of course, at the end with people they loved how I wrote it. And you could read some of the comments they left. I got a lot of private messages off of this. Someone even made some fan art. But the mystery box, I give you clues all the way. I'm not one of those ones who says, boom, look, I changed the universe all at the last chapter. But you don't understand what's going on, even though all the crumbs are there. And everyone that has told me about it, and their feelings, like I said, I got a lot of private chats about this. It made complete sense when you get to the end. It's the last chapter, very last chapter, and the epilogue where you can go, oh, wow. And I'm going to leave that one open because if people want to run with it after that point, I know a lot of people that could use this for a lot of different things. But I had fun doing it. It was a story based on, for me, trying to express, I told you that quiet feeling that little rush that you get, and basing a communication that comes through that across universes.
Yep. So, so of all the stories that we've touched on here, so Evolution is out right now. Link below. By all means, go ahead and grab that. What about the availability of the others? What are we looking at?
Every 2 months. Every 2 months.
Every 2 months. Okay.
Cool.
I'm hoping until the Blood Witch should be out. There's something going on with paper, I think, at Amazon. But it was supposed to be
almost
out.
like there might be some supply line problems.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's what it is, because the paper is done on different. The book is too big for them to make it in hardback.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to be paperback. So there's paper's difference. And I think that's where the issue is, but I don't know. It's very difficult to get in contact with anyone there.
I can tell you too that just working in an industry that deals with shipping, sometimes it's even just as simple as that the paper exists, but they can't get it transported to where it needs to be because there's not enough truckers, it's a mess. It really, really is.
That might be, and they may be limited to their sources that supply it.
Yeah.
If it continues to have problems, I'm gonna see if I can pull that and rework it to where it has a different type of paper mill, those type of things, because it gives you a few options to use: matte finish, glossy finish, this type. They can't use glossy with the paperback, but you have options.
Yeah, and that's actually pivoting into. I want to ask you. I want to be sensitive to you and your time. Do we still have you for a little while?
I'm going to fight it out. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to lead into a different aspect of writing, and that's, how I think everybody who loves stories, everyone who loves the books they are consuming, imagines their own stories and thinks about stories they would like to write. What would your advice be to somebody who wants to get into writing and publishing and so forth?
I've had quite a few people approach me. They'll send me clips, bits and pieces of things that they wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest advice, and very few of them take it, is to realize that you don't know what you're doing. There's a lot of people that say, I got a great story, and maybe the story is good. And I've read it, and I thought the idea is okay, but you can't write.
Yeah.
And until you get a really, really good editor who could help you, and you're going to spend a lot of money, this editor taking you hand in hand through this story, it's not going anywhere. And I've had a few people insulted by that. But but I'm not going to sugarcoat it because I don't want them to get false hopes, and then not be able to overcome the hurdles that are before them. Because I do want them. I love it when people write. I love it when people create. I love it, all of it. Every voice needs to be heard. It just, in the aspect of being able to have it where other people will enjoy it,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be at a certain quality. And if it's written for third graders, don't hit them with college level themes when you can't
Right.
write above a third grade level, or vice versa. The reader that you're intending to receive it just won't like it, simply because of the way it's written, not because of what's in the content.
Right. Right.
So I think the biggest thing is to be humble and listen to advice when it comes. And I've been begging people up and down for criticism, and I just don't get it. I guess I'm really fortunate that way.
Yeah.
I just get people praising it over and over and over again. And it is something that, and I'm going to sound so conceited, and I'm very sorry for this. It is something that I haven't had to work for. I think life prepared me for it, learning to communicate because of being a doctor, because of
Sure.
reading, those type of things all apply to it. Life experience makes better imagery. And then having read enough to know how an actual sentence works
Yeah.
helps you be able to put down your imagery into something that somebody else can feel or see or hear without confusing them or turning them off.
Yeah. No, I was gonna. Oh, you
No, go
paused
ahead.
there. I was gonna say the thing about humility. Yeah, I mean that really hits me because I'll tell you, I have found from what I've read of some of my favorite authors, a very common thing that they say is, I'm my own harshest critic. I'm my own harshest critic. And I get that because you have such a high expectation for yourself, right? And that's oftentimes a great way to come into it because it does make it a little bit easier for you to take the criticism. So if you're already a harsh critic of yourself, and then someone comes along and says, this isn't making a lot of sense, you don't get all bent out of shape about it. You look at it and you go, okay, good. This is something I can work on. This is something I can do. But you're absolutely right. I see it. And as my Netter often calls me a wordsmith. She often comes to me when she's doing any kind of writing herself. I need a word for this. I need to, and I'll help her massage what she's writing. Sometimes, especially when she's really emotional, can you help me craft this? And I'll help her tone the language down, take some of the emotion out of it, and so forth. I'm not necessarily saying I'm not trying to build myself up. I'm just sharing what she said. But I do think it gives me some insight to when I read other people's writing, whether it's creative writing or stuff on the internet and stuff. And I look and I see,
Give me just 1
poorly
second.
edited. Sure. Poorly edited, bad spelling, wrong use of words, there and there, THEIR, THERE, THEY apostrophe RE. It's like, these words matter. This is important. Okay. And if you use the wrong one, yes, I might figure out what you meant later on. But right now, my brain is going, I'm pulled out of it and I got to figure out what it is you're trying to say. If you can't get those kinds of things down, then the story almost doesn't matter because you're just, again, not communicating. It's communication between you and your audience.
Find a friend or a loved one too that maybe can read over your work and point out mistakes to you. Because sometimes as a writer, you don't always see some of your own mistakes. I mean, you should be doing your best to edit on your own as well. But
They call those beta readers.
All right,
Beta
right,
readers.
right.
Yeah, go through a bunch of beta readers before seeking out a then professional editor. Yeah, it's going to cost, but if you're serious about it, it's what you're gonna have to do.
And be careful of editors too. I ran
Right.
into that problem. One of the publishing company that I was working with for a while, their editors were more of the mindset that they were to edit for content ideas, not
Oh.
phrasing, punctuation, those type of things. So to give you an example, in the Blood Witch, which they started to work on, and I said, no, you can't touch it because you're an idiot. There were parts where they were traveling. Of course, a lot of stories will have traveling, and there was some ancient ruins there. And their criticism was those ruins wouldn't be there because the people would take them down and use them for other things. And I said, have you ever visited Scotland or Ireland or Germany and seen all these ruins? The pyramids are still there. There was another point where someone had saw an approaching group, and it was like 5 miles off, and they said, well, you can only see 3 miles because of the curvature of the earth. And I said, what school did you attend? Well, I used to watch Catalina Island 25 miles away when I was sitting on the beach in Huntington. Then another one was, well, people can't march 20 miles in a day. And I sent a link, said, well, here's the British soldiers full pack doing it in 5 hours.
Yeah.
So it was things like that.
Yeah.
Took me 4 hours.
Yeah. I mean, ADEGA's pointing out people with a full pack, but you're right. People do it.
Right. There were things where, like, all young men are perverts. They don't think of heroic things. And I says, no, it's the heroics first. It was a lot of things like that. They wanted to marry Sue, and they wanted all the guys to be stupid. And I just said, no, you're done.
Yeah.
You can't touch my work. They were mad, but too bad. So you got to watch your editors. You got to get one that says, okay, it's your story. But if you're using the word loft every other sentence, you got to find a thesaurus and change it. And something for netters, if you're having issues of writing something, what you want to do is, and it's like we said very early on, you can say the same thing over and over, but in each instance, you might want to use, and it may stretch your mind a little bit, use words that describe an image. Then within the same sentence or the next sentence, use words that describe feelings. And then go to the sounds without being descriptive of the environment so much as it is being descriptive of what the character is experiencing. That should help. So,
absolutely. Real quick, I wanted to say goodnight to PJ and hello to Maria.
Good night, PJ. See you, bud. And hello, Maria.
It's like Dad's going to bed. Mom's going to keep an eye on us now.
There we go.
But no, great advice. And I just keep going back to what you said about the humility. And look, Scripture says many advisors make victory assured. If you don't want input, you're not going to be successful. But if you do look for input, you got to expect the criticism, and you got to love the criticism. You've got to know that that's going to make you better, right?
Right.
You don't sharpen a blade without grinding it a bit.
Yeah, and see, this is where I sound conceited again. I went to beta readers. My brother, I knew, was very, very well read. I let him read it. And then one of my patients, who is basically a Dune scholar, all sci-fi stories, things like that. He was very good at it. And I said, well, you can give me an honest critique. Mm-hmm. I didn't get anything from them. They said, this has to be in print.
Yeah.
So it seems so unreal to me.
Yeah.
And I think the final thing that broke me from that, again, trying not to sound conceited, was when Joe Malazzi said, your stuff is outstanding. And okay. All right.
It says something too that and I thought this too as I was looking at your promotional videos and whatnot. A lot of fans doing fan art for your stuff. So obviously you are speaking to that creative, element. You're stimulating imaginations,
Yeah.
which is exactly what we're looking for in our fandoms, right? That's what makes us fans.
Which is funny, when the Reach eventually will come to print, I already have the cover because one of the people who listened in on YouTube drew a picture one day, and I said, "That's perfect.
That's nice.
Absolutely. She nailed it."
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So this is you probably weren't expecting this, but I'm going to blow a little more smoke up your bum because I'm kind of a fan too. But you probably don't get this one very much. You have a great voice, and so I'm going to encourage everybody to not only buy the book, which is linked below, but by all means subscribe to ADEGA, hit that notification bell. He reads chapters from his book, and it is
excellent.
a great read. It is just, you could just close your eyes and listen, and just it's it's right up there with ASMR. Definitely.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've heard it a few times. I got criticized in music because once upon a time I was a professional sax player. I've had a lot of excursions into the right brain, and a lot of people in music would get mad at me because they say, "Well, we're doing this music ensemble. You need to sing this part. You need to sing that part." And I said, "I can't sing, but you can play the saxophone so well. All musicians can sing." And I said, "No, I can't." And they said, "Well, yeah, try it." And said, once they heard it, they go, "No, you can't."
I'm surprised that you got that because I've got musical theater background too. I played the trombone. I know. The voice is a very different instrument. And just because you can play the trombone doesn't mean you can play the trumpet. Doesn't mean you can play the cello or the piano, even if you
Right.
can read music, right? By
Right.
the same token, everyone thinks they can sing, but not everyone can sing.
Right. Right.
And sometimes if you know how to read music, if you know pitch, you can hear when something is right and wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean you can sing it, but it definitely lets you know that you're not hitting the right notes and you shouldn't be singing.
Right.
I mean,
right.
no, I get that. I think that kind of speaks to the humility we were talking about earlier with the writing too. Knowing what you're capable of, knowing what you would require a great deal more practice at. Because I will say this, I will agree with those people telling you if you can play the saxophone, if you can play the trombone, whatever, you can sing, but right now you are not able. You need to practice until you can get there. You have the skills, you just need to develop the voice,
Right. No, and I think the only complete thing, if you wanted to hear anything, I got a bunch of short stories. I did a friend of mine through doing my YouTube stuff. You saw it on the one commercial, the first one where it had co.ag. He's in England, music man. Love the guy to death. He's very, very, very talented. On occasion, we do collaborations for Halloween stuff. So you can go to my playlists and you look up odds and ends, and there'll be some spooky stories in there that I read that I've written. He'll give me things like, well, write something about all work and no play. It's okay. I come up with a short story and he puts music to it, or, things like that. Or I woke up with blood on my hands, different things, and the phrase will come out in the story. But so there's some of that there, but I think the only complete thing I still have on there would be the Reach. So I go to the playlist and start at the beginning and listen through if you want to.
I am just dropping the link to that playlist because I think people would enjoy that. So he just mentioned, why did that not work? Give me a second. Copy. maybe I've just had too much of a mega pint to be able to type
Do you have
correctly.
admin rights?
Copy link address.
Do you
There
have
we
admin
go.
rights on your own channel?
Right.
Oh,
Are you a wrench?
I just realized I was hitting Control B instead of Control V. That was the problem. But someone let
Yeah.
me know if that link actually worked. I don't know if
Yeah, that's the short stories. And the one time, the
Mm-hmm.
only time that I will ever do it, there's fanfic for Star Trek, Axanar.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
But
he goes
other
to
than that,
X-Arc short stories.
don't touch it.
Cool. Okay. That's the first one, is the XNR short stories. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then again, if you look at the playlist, you'll see the reach is in there too if you're interested. But just it's something to do if you got quiet time, you want to pay attention. But those, again, like I said before, they are unedited
Mhm.
versions of what I've written, because I listen to it and say, well, I phrased that weird, or I've used. There was one of the evolution ones where I did it and I said fighter for like a fighter ship, and it repeated over and over and over again. I said, whoa, I really have to rework that. And so I went back and changed it. But when it was on YouTube, you can hear the errors.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. Well, and I normally don't talk about my process too much, but like every week, those of you that come here every Friday know I start out with that little intro. I record that every week, and I write that out. I write that out and I read it off the script. And it's not sometimes it's not until you've written it and start going to record it that you go, that doesn't sound right.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
Let me reword that. Change that. Sometimes I'll do it on the fly as I'm saying it, but Netter will tell you, she hears me recording it and I'll go, no, I can't do it. Sometimes if it's written that a certain way, I have to do it the way it's written. So I've got to rewrite it and then go back. I can't necessarily do it online. I mean, yeah, that's just my process, but I get it.
It works.
I get it. And maybe that's going back to what you were talking about before, Adega, this idea of verbal, auditory, visual. Sometimes you read it, you say it, you hear it. Maybe you need to go through all of those before you can really evaluate it. So, yeah.
Right.
But,
And on rare occasions, there'll be that special time when you do something and you go back and you read it, or when you actually write it, it fills you with such emotion that you're wiped out. You have to walk away from it. You think, hey, I'm just writing, but the emotional aspect becomes such, they call it in the zone, but it's like when your mind is on a flat, even keel.
Yep.
With the creative process. You're not hyper, you're not suppressed. It's just that calm energy where things start flowing through, and then you start feeling the emotion of it. It becomes really impactful. I've had it a few times where I just had to put things down and walk away and take a nap or something because it was draining, but it was really rewarding.
And I'll tell you, some of the best books, I know exactly what you're talking about, where you get to a certain point, you read a chapter. I mean, I've been moved to tears, and I can't go on and read the next chapter just yet. I need to take a break and process it. But there's something magical about being moved by a story like that. Really, any art. A song can do that. A painting can do that. But any art. And I'll tell you what. I mean, it's like the quote that you had in your promotional piece. It's almost not worth it if it's not moving you emotionally, right? I mean,
Right.
what's the point? What's the point? What are you getting out of it?
Right.
So we're at the 2-hour mark. I want to start bringing this to a close. Is there any last thoughts, any last words you want to get in there, Adega, and share with the YouTubeverse, the the handful of people that are listening, and the even fewer that might listen in the future?
Not probably just to hear Agent Boomer, since you and I've done all the talking.
Oh no, I mean I did some talking, but
He's just here to make sure I can end the stream safely.
yeah.
No,
Actually, I do have a excuse me, my voice is going. I do have a closing question for you though. Was there a writer you read growing up that inspired you at all to become a writer yourself, or was there like one particular, or maybe not? I don't know.
I'm weird. Sorry, you have to forgive
okay.
me.
No, that's a good thing.
The two first things I read, starting, I think, when I was 9,
Mhm.
I read the encyclopedia from A through T, I think.
Wow.
And then I read the Old Testament.
Mhm.
And then my dad handed me a book, and I cannot remember what it was. It was a 4-book series about 4 planets in a star system, where each planet had very different aspects to it, and our hero had to go from one to the other and experience vastly different things on each one. And then he wanted me to read Louis L'Amour, and I never got into it. I read Last of the Breed, which was more of a modern one, but the rest of them were the cowboy stuff. It just really didn't hold any interest to me. But more recently, from the sci-fi end, a guy by the name of Ian Douglas, who does Star Carrier and Space Marines, big series. I kind of like how he writes, but I think for most people who like science fiction, this is very, very science heavy and turns a lot of people off, but I thought it was good.
Okay.
And on the fantasy end is Tchaikovsky. He's the Witcher guy.
Right.
It's, some people absolutely love it. Some people think it's kind of mediocre. I thought it was really good, but I like the idea of a Witcher. But when it came to early, like I said, I started off reading manuals and the encyclopedia. I guess I'm kind of weird,
No, it's okay. I mean, I started reading books about Egypt when I was a kid. I didn't like the library until I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I wanted to read about Egypt now. So that was what happened.
Nice.
Yeah, so.
You made me remember. Actually, the first one I read was in I was 7, and I brought home a book from the school library on vampires.
Oh,
So that was it. That's where it started. And then I kind of liked checking out, mythological and what do they call those, cryptids, those type of things.
yes. I used to read an author named Daniel Cohen growing up back in the day. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he used to write a lot of cryptid books, ghost books, UFO books, stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So once again, I want to say that we have down below ADEGA's. I guess one thing I think I've got it listed there down in the notes. Your ADEGAoutlaw.com. Are you going to be updating that as the books come out and whatnot?
That was where I had digital material. All the books were there digitally first, and I pulled them down because they weren't selling. I had a T-shirt there that has the Children of Directive stuff, and I started wearing it. And this is actually Springs. Used to be Teesprings. They call it Springs now. Their T-shirts were garbage. There's no way I'm going to sell that to anybody. I know a few people bought them, but it's like, no, I pulled them down. So there's just the one cup. If anything comes down the line, maybe. But right now, I'm just sitting.
If you go to the page right now, there is a he mentioned the symbol for the directive. You can see it on the tumbler that's there. And originally, as we were going into the stream, I was going to say, "What are you sipping on?" And is it out of a directive tumbler? But
yeah, no.
Okay, I think it's great branding because it's an easily remembered ADEGAoutlaw.com. Just
right.
Go to it, but the link directly to the book, to to Evolution right down there. Go ahead, click on it. Not an affiliate link. I get nothing out of it. I'm only doing this, because I think it's great content and great entertainment, and you are going to enjoy it. And I am doing you a favor by sharing it with all of you.
1 second. Troy.
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been fun. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. No, and thank you for taking the time to come on my channel and let me
you're
put my
talking
money
about
where
me,
my
so-
mouth is.
You're talking about me, so how hard can it be?
Well, yeah, right. Yeah, easy topic. The subject matter, right? I'm kind of putting my money where my mouth is, though, because I do a lot of talking about how disappointed I am in modern entertainment and our favorite franchises, and I said, look to other new things. That's where we got our love of Star Wars and Star Trek and everything before. It was new, it was different, no one had done it before. So it gives me an opportunity to say, here's an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. People, go check this thing out. But yeah, and so rest of the week, Age of Boomer, we got tomorrow over on Netters Network. Make sure you hit. She's down in the description too. Yes, I know. Hit her page and subscribe and tomorrow we will be doing a watch party of a Chicago classic, The Blues Brothers. So that's going to be a lot of fun over on Netters Network. Retro Cinema. Sunday, we will be over on Age of Boomer's channel. Age of Boomer, I haven't really had much of a chance to touch base with you, other than having sent you the draft of the notes.
Yes.
But anything you want to share about what we'll be talking about?
Nothing. We are going to have a special guest, Mr. Matchstick, on at the beginning. He's going to do a rant about the gaming industry. Has to do with him playing Elden Ring for the first time. So we actually haven't talked about Elden Ring at all on the channel. That's the big video game that's out now, and we have many topics to talk about. Like you said, the passing of that
Julie Cruz, absolutely,
and
and a lot of firings going on, a lot of changes in the industry.
So
a lot of announcements came out of Ghostbusters. I only put down the two major ones, but there was a lot. This was Ghostbusters week, so we'll be getting a lot of that. Tuesday over on
nothing this week.
Not this week. The following week is Gravity Falls, right?
No, following week is Culture Fortress.
Okay. I got to remember what I said I was going to do for Culture Fortress.
I think you said tripods, but you may have come up with something else too, so I don't know.
Okay, we'll figure it out. Then let me see. Maybe I'll ask him, have I done Twin Peaks? Maybe I'll do Twin Peaks.
You have.
Oh, I have? Well, then I won't. Okay.
You can do something else by Lynch, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Wednesday?
Wednesday, I'll do a rewatch of RoboCop with Soundtracks with Birdman.
Soundtracks with Birdman?
For that.
Soundtracks with Birdman.
Oh, we should mention too, deleted scenes in the chat. He has a morning serial show in the morning tomorrow. You should check out his channel.
Absolutely, and deleted scenes ought to have been dropping his channel if he hasn't already. You should just do that. He has. He is awesome to have as a Blue Wrench. Absolutely. Thursday, Friday, and that brings us around to next week. And I have no idea what I'll be talking about, so I highly recommend that if there's a topic you want me to cover next week, drop a comment, let me know. Send me a DM on the Twitter tweets or on the MeWe or whatever.
Okay.
And
politics, because I liked watching your face get red.
I would not be opposed to doing a political rant. I mean,
maybe I'll see if I can clip that part of our last stream my channel out. He did we talked a bit about the what's Zuckerberg's new thing called? The metaverse. Harassment on the metaverse, and Troy's reaction to that. It's just, I'm not going to get into it now, but I'll see if I can clip it. It's just
the thing about my rants is it has nothing to do with the amount of alcohol in me. I could be stone cold sober. I could be, 3 sheets to the wind. the emotion comes. It really does. That's great.
The struggle is real, people.
The struggle. Well, yeah, poor Netter. Pray for Netter. She has to live with me. You guys only have to deal with me for 2 hours on a Friday. She
She will be sainted.
She should be sainted. Absolutely. All right, guys. I just want to thank our special guest, ADEGA. I share because it's good stuff, and I super appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And
Just wait till you read it.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I might have to buy another copy so I can get it autographed. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me. Yeah, I don't know if anyone was paying attention, but that mega pint was filled repeatedly. So I'm when I started typing, I wasn't sure I was going to get through a sentence. I mean,
And you may have been drunk in that video, correct?
There's a possibility of that, yes, sir.
so thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care, and we'll catch you later on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, ladies.
Good night, sir.
Hit it, sweetheart.